The first thing you need to know about betrayal is that it smells like vanilla body spray and lies. I discovered this at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, standing in my own kitchen, staring at my wife's phone while she showered off whatever guilt she'd accumulated that evening. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Alex Danner, and up until that moment I thought I was living a reasonably happy life. 42 years old, IT support specialist for a mid-sized accounting firm, married to Marta for 18 years, 2 kids in college. The kind of life where your biggest worry is whether the lawn mower will start on Saturday morning. I wasn't snooping, not really. Marta had left her phone on the counter, and it kept buzzing. Being the helpful husband, I glanced over to see if it was something important. Maybe her sister Victoria having another crisis, or her friend Erin needing a ride home from whatever bar she'd chosen to destroy her liver in that night. Instead, I saw a text from someone named Jake. Can't wait to taste you again tomorrow. Wear the red thing. My coffee mug hit the floor. The crash echoed through our suburban Minneapolis kitchen like a gunshot, ceramic fragments scattering across the tiles I'd installed myself 3 summers ago. Funny how your brain focuses on stupid details when your world starts collapsing. I picked up the phone with shaking hands. The shower was still running upstairs. Marta always took 20-minute showers, said it was her thinking time. Apparently, she'd been doing a lot of thinking lately. Jake Turnbull. I knew that name. He worked at Marta's advertising agency, some hotshot account manager she'd mentioned a few times. Really ambitious, she'd said. Going places. Apparently, one of those places was my wife. I scrolled through their conversation, my stomach turning with each message. 3 months of exchanges. 3 months of my wife planning secret meetings, describing intimate details, making jokes about me. Alex is working late again, she'd written just last week. Perfect timing for us. The shower stopped. I heard Marta humming something upstairs, probably the same tune she'd been humming for weeks. I'd thought she seemed happier lately, more energetic. Stupid me, I'd been proud that my wife was feeling good about herself. I set the phone back exactly where she'd left it and swept up the broken mug. By the time Marta came downstairs in her robe, hair wrapped in a towel, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee, reading the news on my tablet like nothing had happened. "Morning, honey," she said, kissing the top of my head. The vanilla scent was stronger now, mixed with her expensive shampoo. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I said, which was true enough. I'd been lying awake for hours, listening to her phone buzz with messages from her boyfriend. She grabbed her phone, glanced at it, and smiled. Actually smiled, right in front of me. "Victoria wants to meet for lunch today," she said. "Girl talk, you know how it is." I nodded, taking a sip of coffee that tasted like ash. "Of course. Have fun." Over the next week, I became a detective in my own home. I installed a keylogger on our shared computer, started paying attention to Marta's schedule, noticed patterns I'd been too trusting to see before. The late nights at client dinners that always seemed to happen when Jake was posting pictures from expensive restaurants on social media. The new lingerie she claimed was just for me, but never seemed to wear around me. The way she'd started working out obsessively, coming home flushed and energetic in a way that had nothing to do with exercise. The breaking point came on a Friday night. Marta was hosting her monthly girls' night in our backyard, something she'd been doing for years. Usually, I'd hide in my home office with headphones, letting her and her friends drink wine and gossip about their neighbors. But this time, I cracked the window and listened. "I swear Jake gets better every time," Marta was saying, her voice slightly slurred from wine. "Alex is sweet, but he's so predictable. Jake makes me feel alive again." Victoria's laugh cut through the night air. "I told you to dump Alex years ago. He's boring, Marta. You're in your prime, and you're wasting it on a guy who gets excited about lawn care." "It's not that simple," Marta replied. The house, the kids' college funds, the retirement accounts. Alex handles all that stuff. I need to be smart about this. Aaron's voice joined in. So what's the plan? Keep Jake as your boy toy and Alex as your bank account? For now, Marta said. But I'm thinking maybe it's time for a change. Jake's been talking about us getting a place together. He's got that promotion coming up, and honestly, starting over might be worth it. I closed the window and sat in the dark, processing what I'd just heard. My wife wasn't just cheating on me, she was planning to leave me, but only after she'd figured out how to maximize her financial gain. 18 years of marriage, reduced to a cost-benefit analysis. The next morning, I confronted her. Not about Jake, not yet. I started small. How was girls' night? I asked over breakfast. Oh, same old drama. Victoria's dating some new guy, Aaron's having problems at work. She didn't even look up from her phone. Anyone mention anything about relationships? Marriage advice? Now she looked at me, her expression carefully neutral. Why would you ask that? Just curious. Sometimes I worry we're getting too comfortable, taking each other for granted. Marta reached across the table and squeezed my hand. The gesture felt like ice. Alex, we're fine. Don't overthink everything like you always do. That afternoon, while Marta was at her lunch with Victoria, I drove to Jake's apartment complex. I'd looked up his address online, found his red Mustang in the parking lot. Flashy car for a guy who supposedly made less than my wife. I sat in my Honda Civic, feeling pathetic, until I saw them. Marta and Jake walking hand in hand toward his building. She was wearing the red dress he'd mentioned in his text, the one I'd complimented her on last month when she said she'd bought it for a work event. They were laughing about something, completely absorbed in each other, and when they stopped to kiss by the entrance, I felt something die inside my chest. I drove home and started planning. The thing about revenge is that it requires patience, and I'd spent 18 years learning to be patient with Marta. Now that patience was going to serve a different purpose. I called my old friend Pete Kowalski, who'd left the Minneapolis Police Department 5 years ago to start his own private investigation business. We'd been buddies since high school, and he was one of the few people who'd always seen through Marta's charm. I need your help, I told him over beers at Mickey's Tavern, a dive bar where Marta would never be caught dead. And I need it to be completely legal. Pete listened to the whole story without interruption, occasionally shaking his head. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me. You sure you want to go down this road, Alex? Sometimes it's better to just walk away clean. She's planning to take me for everything I'm worth, Pete. 18 years of building a life together, and she's treating it like a business transaction. I can't just walk away. What do you want to accomplish here? I thought about that for a long moment. I want her to lose everything she thinks she's gaining. Her reputation, her boyfriend, her friends, her job prospects. I want her to understand that actions have consequences. Pete nodded slowly. Okay, but we do this smart. No laws broken, no violence, nothing that comes back on you. Agreed? Agreed. Over the next 2 weeks, Pete helped me gather intelligence. We documented Marta's affair thoroughly. Photos of her entering Jake's apartment, credit card records showing expensive dinners and hotel rooms, even video of them together at a downtown bar where they clearly weren't worried about being seen. But the real goldmine was Jake himself. Pete's contacts at the police department revealed that Jake Turnbull had a gambling problem and owed serious money to some unpleasant people. He was also skimming from client accounts at the agency, using the money to pay his debts and fund his lifestyle. The red Mustang, the expensive dinners, the nice apartment, it was all built on borrowed time and stolen money. This guy's a walking disaster, Pete told me, showing me the financial records he'd legally obtained through his PI connections. Your wife picked a real winner. Meanwhile, at home, I played the role of the oblivious husband. I encouraged Marta's nights out, even suggested she spend more time with her friends. I wanted her to get comfortable, to stop being careful. You seem different lately, she said one evening, studying me across the dinner table, more relaxed. I've been thinking about what you said, about not overthinking everything. Maybe I should trust more, worry less. She smiled, and for a moment, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. It made what I was planning both easier and harder. I'm glad, she said. I want us to be happy, Alex. So do I replied, and meant it. I wanted to be happy. I just didn't think it was going to be with her. The first move came on a Wednesday night. Marta was at Jake's place for one of their regular meetings, and I was at Mickey's with Pete, establishing an alibi. While we played pool and made sure the bartender remembered us, Pete's associate was in Jake's apartment building parking lot, letting the air out of all 4 tires on the red Mustang. It was petty, but it sent a message. Jake would know someone was watching. The next morning, Marta was agitated. Jake had some trouble with his car last night, she said, pacing around the kitchen. Someone vandalized it. That's terrible, I said, not looking up from my newspaper. Did he call the police? He doesn't want to make a big deal about it, probably just kids. But I could see the worry in her eyes. The perfect bubble of their secret affair had been popped, just a little. The second move was more sophisticated. I'd discovered that Jake's cousin Bryce owned a high-end bar downtown, the kind of place where Marta and her friends liked to pretend they were sophisticated. It was also where Jake did most of his gambling, and where he owed most of his money. Pete and I arranged to have a conversation with Rita, the bartender who'd been Jake's girlfriend before Marta came along. Rita was more than happy to share details about Jake's financial problems and his tendency to juggle multiple women. He's been promising to pay Bryce back for months, Rita told us, polishing glasses with angry efficiency. But he keeps spending money on this new woman, some married chick from his work. Bryce is getting impatient. What happens when Bryce gets impatient? Pete asked. Rita's smile was sharp. Nothing violent if that's what you're asking. Bryce is too smart for that. But Jake's going to lose his credit, his reputation, maybe his job. Word gets around fast in this business. That gave me an idea. The third move required timing. I knew Marta and Jake would be at Bryce's bar on Friday night. It was their new favorite spot, and Jake was probably trying to show off for her. I also knew that Victoria and Aaron would be there, because Marta had been bragging about this exclusive place she'd discovered. Pete and I arrived early, positioning ourselves at the far end of the bar where we could observe without being noticed. I'd brought a small digital recorder, the kind that's perfectly legal to use in public spaces. Marta's group arrived at 9, laughing and dressed to kill. Jake was playing the big shot, ordering expensive champagne and telling stories that made the women hang on his every word. He was handsome, I had to admit, in a slick, dangerous way that probably made Marta feel like she was living in a movie. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept darting toward Bryce behind the bar. And when Bryce finally approached their table, Jake's confident facade cracked. "Jake, my friend," Bryce said, his voice carrying just enough edge to cut through the bar's ambient noise. "How are we doing with that conversation we had last week?" "Everything's fine, Bryce. Just need a few more days." It's been a few more days several times now. My patience isn't infinite. Marta looked confused, glancing between Jake and Bryce. Victoria and Aaron had stopped talking, sensing drama. "Is there a problem?" Marta asked, her voice tight. Bryce smiled at her, but it wasn't friendly. "No problem at all, beautiful. Just business between old friends. Jake understands." After Bryce walked away, the mood at their table shifted. Jake tried to laugh it off, but the women weren't buying it anymore. I watched Marta's face change as she started putting pieces together, started wondering what else Jake might be hiding from her. They left earlier than usual, and I could see them arguing in the parking lot before getting into separate cars. The fourth move was the cruelest and the most necessary. I waited until Marta was at work, then called her office. "Hi, This is Alex Danner, Marta's husband. I'm planning a surprise party for our anniversary, and I was hoping to coordinate with Jake Turnbull about some of the work friends to invite. The receptionist was happy to help, giving me Jake's direct extension and even mentioning how sweet it was that I was planning something special. When Jake answered, I got right to the point. This is Alex Danner, Marta's husband. I think we need to have a conversation. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. I don't know what you think you know, Jake finally said. I know about the affair. I know about your gambling debts. I know about the money you've been stealing from client accounts. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a choice. End it with my wife, clean up your act, and we can all move forward. Or keep going, and I'll make sure everyone knows everything. Your boss, your cousin, the police, Marta's friends, everyone. Jake's laugh was shaky. You think Marta's going to choose you? She's already made her choice, old man. We'll see, I said, and hung up. That night, Marta came home agitated again. Jake had told her about my call, but he'd obviously downplayed the details. Alex, we need to talk, she said, cornering me in the kitchen. About what? You called Jake today. You accused him of things. I set down my coffee and looked at her directly. I know about the affair, Marta. Her face went white, then red. I don't know what you think you know, but I know about the 3 months of text messages. I know about the hotels and the dinners and the lies. I know you've been planning to leave me as soon as you figure out how to maximize your take from the divorce. She stared at me, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much I actually knew and how much I was guessing. Alex, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. The question is, what happens now? She straightened her shoulders, and I saw the moment she decided to go on the offensive. What happens now is that I'm done pretending to be happy in a marriage that died years ago. Jake makes me feel alive again, something you haven't done in a long time. I want a divorce. Fine, I said, but you should know that Jake's been cheating on you too, with Rita, the bartender at your favorite new club. And he's about to lose everything because of his gambling debts and the money he's been stealing. You picked a real winner, Marta. The doubt flickered across her face, but she pushed it away. You're lying. You're just trying to hurt me because you can't stand that I found someone better. We'll see, I said again. The beauty of truth is that it doesn't require belief to be effective. Over the next week, I watched Marta struggle with the seeds of doubt I'd planted. She started asking Jake more questions, paying closer attention to his evasions, noticing the things she'd been too infatuated to see before. Meanwhile, Pete and I prepared for the main event. Bryce's bar hosted a monthly high-roller poker game in the back room, and Jake was a regular player despite being terrible at cards. More importantly, Marta and her friends often came to the bar on poker nights, enjoying the atmosphere of danger and excitement. I knew they'd be there on Saturday night because Marta had made a point of telling me she was having girls' night again. What she didn't know was that Rita had agreed to help us, motivated by her own desire for revenge against Jake. He owes me money too, Rita had told Pete, and I'm tired of watching him parade around with his new sugar mama while I'm stuck covering his tabs. The plan was simple but devastating. Rita would serve Marta's table, making sure to mention Jake's history with other women. Pete would be playing in the poker game, documenting Jake's increasingly desperate bets. And I would be there to capture everything, including the moment when Jake's house of cards finally collapsed. Saturday night arrived gray and rainy, perfect weather for what I had planned. I arrived at the bar early, positioning myself in a corner booth where I could see everything but remain unnoticed. Pete was already at the poker table, playing the role of a casual gambler with more money than sense. Marta's group arrived at 10, and I felt a familiar pang watching my wife laugh and flirt with her friends. She was wearing a black dress I'd bought her for Christmas, looking beautiful and confident, and completely unaware that her world was about to implode. Jake joined them after finishing his shift at the agency, and I could immediately see the tension between him and Marta. She was watching him more carefully now, asking pointed questions about his day, his finances, his plans. He was deflecting with jokes and charm, but the cracks were showing. Rita made her move first. While serving their table, she made casual conversation about the bar's history, mentioning how many couples had met there over the years. Of course, some people prefer variety, she said, looking directly at Jake. Like Jake here. He's introduced me to quite a few of his girlfriends over the months. Always interesting to see his different types. Marta's smile faltered. Different types? Oh, you know Jake, Rita continued innocently. He likes to keep his options open. Very modern approach to dating. Victoria and Aaron exchanged glances, sensing drama brewing. Jake tried to laugh it off, but his discomfort was obvious. Rita's got a great sense of humor, he said, always joking around. Am I joking? Rita asked. I could have sworn I saw you here just 2 weeks ago with that redhead from the marketing firm. Very affectionate, if I remember correctly. The temperature at the table dropped 10 degrees. Marta was staring at Jake now, and he was starting to sweat despite the air conditioning. I think there's been some misunderstanding, Jake said. The only misunderstanding, Rita replied, is thinking you could keep juggling women indefinitely without consequences. That's when the poker game exploded. From across the room, I heard Pete's voice rise above the ambient noise. Jake, you son of a bitch! These cards are marked! The accusation cut through the bar like a knife. Every head turned toward the poker table, where Pete was standing, pointing at Jake, who had gone pale as death. I've been watching you all night, Pete continued, loud enough for everyone to hear. The way you've been reading cards, making bets you shouldn't win. These cards have been tampered with. Bryce appeared instantly, his face dark with anger. Jake, is this true? No, of course not. This guy's just mad because he's losing. But Pete was already showing the cards to the other players, pointing out the subtle markings that would be invisible unless you knew what to look for. The markings that Pete had actually made earlier, but that Jake couldn't prove he hadn't done himself. You've been cheating in my establishment, Bryce said, his voice deadly quiet. Stealing from my customers, making me look bad. Bryce, you know me. I would never... I know you owe me $12,000. I know you've been making promises you can't keep, and now I know you've been cheating to try to pay me back. The entire bar was watching now, including Marta and her friends. I could see the humiliation and realization washing over my wife's face as she understood that everything I'd told her was true. Jake tried to run, pushing through the crowd toward the exit, but Bryce's security was faster, blocking his path. We need to settle accounts, Jake. Tonight. I don't have the money, Jake admitted, his voice breaking. I've been trying to get it together, but you've been spending it on expensive dinners and hotel rooms instead, Bryce finished. I know about your little affair, Jake. I know about a lot of things. Marta stood up abruptly, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. I need to go, she said to Victoria and Aaron. Marta, wait, Jake called out, but she was already pushing through the crowd. I followed her outside, staying far enough back to avoid being seen. She was standing in the rain by her car, crying and talking on her phone. Mom, I think I made a terrible mistake, she was saying. Everything Alex told me was true. Jake's been lying about everything. I got in my own car and drove home, arriving 20 minutes before she did. When she came through the door, soaked and shivering, I was sitting in the living room reading a book. How was girls' night? I asked, without looking up. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out how much I'd orchestrated and how much was coincidence. It was educational, she finally said. Good. Education is important. She went upstairs without another word, and I heard her crying in the shower for the second time in a month. but this time I felt no sympathy. The aftermath of Saturday night played out exactly as I'd hoped. Jake was banned from Bryce's bar and effectively blacklisted from every decent establishment in the city. Word spread quickly through Marta's social circle about his gambling, his cheating, and his financial problems. By Monday morning, he was a pariah. Marta tried to salvage the situation, calling Jake repeatedly and getting either no answer or increasingly desperate explanations. She wanted to believe there was some misunderstanding, some way to make sense of the fantasy she'd been living, but I wasn't done. On Tuesday, I made an anonymous call to Jake's boss at the advertising agency, providing detailed information about the client account irregularities Pete had discovered. I didn't accuse Jake directly. I simply suggested that someone should review the books more carefully. By Wednesday, Jake was suspended pending investigation. By Thursday, Marta was a wreck. "I need to talk to someone," she said over breakfast, her eyes red from crying. "I think I'm having a breakdown." "Maybe you should call Victoria," I suggested. "Or Aaron. They're good friends." But Victoria and Aaron were distancing themselves from Marta's drama. They'd been embarrassed by the scene at the bar, and they didn't want to be associated with the scandal that was following Jake around town. "They're not returning my calls," Marta admitted. "I think they blame me for what happened." "What do you think happened?" I asked. She looked at me with something approaching honesty for the first time in months. "I think I fell for a lie. I think I convinced myself that Jake was something he wasn't because I wanted to feel young and exciting again." "And what about us? What about our marriage?" Marta was quiet for a long time. "I don't know if there's an us anymore, Alex. I've done things, said things. I don't know how we come back from this." "We probably don't," I said, "but we can figure out how to move forward without destroying each other." She nodded, tears starting again. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry." I almost felt bad for her. Almost. That afternoon, while Marta was at work, I began the financial phase of my plan. Over 18 years of marriage, I'd handled most of our money management, and Marta had been happy to let me deal with the boring stuff, while she focused on her career and social life. Now that trust was going to cost her. I moved our savings into accounts that required both signatures for withdrawal. I canceled the credit cards that were in my name but that she'd been using freely. I changed the beneficiaries on my life insurance and retirement accounts from Marta to our children. Everything I did was completely legal. It was my money as much as hers, and I was simply protecting our assets during what was obviously going to be a difficult divorce. When Marta discovered the changes, she was furious. "You can't just cut me off financially," she said, waving a declined credit card at me. "I have expenses, obligations." "So do I. And I'm not cutting you off. I'm making sure we both have access to our money through proper channels. If you need cash, we can discuss it." "This is vindictive, Alex. This is practical. You've been planning to leave me for months, Marta. I'm just making sure the process is fair and transparent." She stared at me, and I could see her recognizing a side of me she'd never encountered before. "You're not the man I married," she said. "No," I agreed. "I'm not. The man you married was naive enough to trust you completely. That man is gone." The next phase required more creativity. I knew Marta would try to paint me as the villain in our divorce, claiming I was controlling and vindictive. I needed to control the narrative before she could establish her version of events. I started with our mutual friends, the couples we'd socialized with for years. I didn't badmouth Marta directly. I simply told them the truth about what had happened and let them draw their own conclusions. "We're getting divorced," I told Tom and Jennifer Walsh over dinner. "Marta's been having an affair with a guy from her work, and it's gotten complicated." "Oh my God, Alex, I'm so sorry," Jennifer said. "We had no idea." She's been very discreet. But the guy turned out to be involved with some unsavory people, gambling debts, financial problems. It's been a mess. Tom shook his head. "What are you going to do?" Try to keep things civil for the kids' sake. But it's hard when you realize your partner has been planning to leave you for months while pretending everything was fine. Word spread quickly through our social circle. By the end of the week, Marta was getting sympathetic but distant responses from people who'd been our friends for years. They weren't taking sides exactly, but they were protecting themselves from the drama. The final blow came when Jake, desperate and facing criminal charges for embezzlement, tried to contact Marta one last time. He called her at work, begging her to loan him money for a lawyer. "I know I screwed up," he said, not realizing that Marta had put the call on speaker in her office. "But what we had was real. You know it was real. Help me get through this, and we can start over somewhere else." "Jake, I can't," Marta said. "I don't have access to that kind of money anymore, and even if I did—" "Even if you did? What? You're going back to your boring husband? You told me you were done with that life." "I told you a lot of things. I think we both got caught up in a fantasy." "A fantasy? 3 months of the best sex of your life was a fantasy?" Marta's coworkers in the adjacent offices could hear every word. By the end of the day, everyone at the agency knew about her affair and Jake's desperate phone call. When she came home that night, Marta looked defeated. "I think I need to find a new job," she said. "The situation at work has become untenable." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it partially. "No, you're not. This is what you wanted, isn't it? For everything to fall apart so completely that I have no choice but to come crawling back to you." I considered her question seriously. "What I wanted was for you to be honest with me. What I got instead was months of lies and planning behind my back. So now we're dealing with the consequences of the choices you made." "And your choices? The way you've systematically destroyed every aspect of my life outside this marriage?" "I haven't destroyed anything, Marta. I've simply stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own actions." She sat down heavily on the couch, looking older than I'd ever seen her. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we figure out how to end this marriage with whatever dignity we have left." But I wasn't quite finished yet. The divorce proceedings began in earnest the following week, and Marta hired the most aggressive attorney she could find, a woman named Sandra Chen, who specialized in taking men to the cleaners in high-conflict divorces. But Sandra Chen had never dealt with a client whose entire life had already been systematically dismantled. "Your husband has been very thorough," Sandra told Marta during their first meeting, reviewing the financial documents I'd provided. "All of your joint assets are properly secured. All transactions are documented and legal, and he's made no moves that could be considered vindictive or punitive under the law. But he's ruined my reputation, destroyed my relationship, isolated me from our friends. None of which is illegal or relevant to divorce proceedings. The affair, however, is very relevant, especially given the documentation he's provided." Marta came home from that meeting looking shell-shocked. "Your lawyer is very good," she said. "I know. I hired him 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks ago? You've been planning this for 3 weeks? "I've been planning this since the night I heard you and your friends discussing how to maximize your take from our divorce. I just wanted to make sure I was as thorough as you were." That weekend, our children came home from college to discuss the divorce. Ross, our 20-year-old son, and Amelia, our 18-year-old daughter, had been watching the situation unfold from a distance, trying to stay neutral. But neutrality became impossible when Marta tried to enlist their support. "Your father has been systematically destroying my life," she told them over dinner. "He's vindictive and controlling, and he's trying to punish me for being honest about my feelings." Ross looked uncomfortable, but Amelia spoke up. "Mom, you cheated on Dad for 3 months. You planned to leave him. You talked about him like he was just a financial convenience. How is any of this his fault?" "Relationships are complicated, Amelia. When you're older, you'll understand. I understand that you lied to all of us. I understand that you betrayed Dad's trust, and then tried to make him look like the bad guy when he found out. Marta turned to me, her eyes flashing with anger. You turned my own children against me. I told them the truth when they asked, that's all. The truth according to you. Ross finally spoke up. Mom, we heard the phone call. Jake called here looking for you last week, and Dad put it on speaker. We heard him talking about the affair, about the money he wanted you to loan him, about the plans you two had made. Dad didn't have to turn us against you. You did that yourself. Marta left the house that night and didn't come back for 3 days. When she returned, she was different. Calmer, but also harder somehow. I've been staying with Victoria, she said, thinking about everything that's happened. And what have you concluded? That you're better at this game than I gave you credit for. You've outmaneuvered me completely. This isn't a game, Marta. Isn't it? You've systematically destroyed every aspect of my life outside this marriage, isolated me from my friends, ruined my career prospects, turned our children against me, and positioned yourself as the wronged party in our divorce. If this isn't a game, you're a natural player. I studied my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, and realized she was right. Somewhere in the process of protecting myself from her betrayal, I had become something harder and more calculating than I'd ever intended to be. Maybe it is a game, I admitted. But you started it when you decided to cheat on me and plan your exit strategy. I just finished it. So what are your terms? What do I have to do to end this with some shred of dignity intact? Sign the divorce papers my lawyer prepared. Take your share of our assets as calculated by the prenup you insisted we sign 15 years ago. Find a new job in a different city if necessary. Start over clean. And if I fight you? Then I release the recordings I made of your conversations with Jake, the financial records showing how you plan to hide assets, and the documentation of your affair to everyone we know, your family, your coworkers, our neighbors, everyone. She stared at me for a long moment. You recorded our private conversations? I recorded conversations that took place in public spaces and on phone calls where I was a participant. Everything completely legal. You've thought of everything. I had good teachers. You and Jake showed me how to plan ahead, how to keep secrets, how to manipulate situations to my advantage. Marta signed the papers the next day. But Jake wasn't finished causing problems. 2 weeks later, he showed up at our house drunk and desperate. The embezzlement charges had been filed, he'd lost his job and his apartment, and Bryce's people were making his life increasingly unpleasant. This is all your fault. He slurred at me through the front door. You destroyed everything good in my life. You destroyed your own life, Jake. I just made sure you couldn't destroy mine too. Marta loves me. We were going to be happy together. Marta was using you to feel young again, and you were using her to fund your gambling habit. Neither of you loved anything but the fantasy you created. He tried to push past me into the house, but 18 years of suburban lawn care had kept me in better shape than his lifestyle had kept him. I blocked his path easily. She's not here, Jake. She moved out last week. It's over. Where did she go? That's not your concern anymore. He stood on my porch, swaying slightly, looking pathetic and dangerous at the same time. You think you won, he said, but you lost her. You lost your wife, your marriage, your family. All you did was make sure everyone else lost too. Maybe, I said, but I kept my dignity and my self-respect. Can you say the same? He left without another word, and I never saw him again. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was living alone in the house Marta and I had shared for 15 years. The kids visited regularly, and we'd found a new equilibrium as a family of 3 instead of 4. Marta had taken a job with an advertising firm in Denver, starting over in a city where no one knew her story. We spoke occasionally about practical matters, but the woman I'd been married to for 18 years had become a stranger. I was cleaning out the garage when I found the spare key. It was tucked behind a paint can on the workbench, the key to the front door that Marta had hidden there years ago in case of emergencies. I'd forgotten about it completely, but seeing it brought back a flood of memories from better times. I held the small piece of metal in my palm, thinking about all the doors it had opened, all the times it had represented safety and home and belonging. Now it was just a useless artifact from a life that no longer existed. My phone rang. It was Pete. "You might want to see the news," he said. "Your friend Jake made the papers." I turned on the television and found the local news station. Jake's picture filled the screen as the anchor reported his sentencing for embezzlement and fraud. 2 years in federal prison, restitution that would take him decades to pay off, and a criminal record that would follow him forever. In related news, the anchor continued, the defendant's former employer, Pinnacle Advertising, has implemented new financial oversight procedures following the scandal that cost the agency several major clients and led to significant layoffs. I thought about Marta, starting over in Denver, probably watching the same news report and wondering how different her life might have been if she'd made different choices. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I opened the door, I was surprised to see Victoria, Marta's sister. "Alex," she said, looking uncomfortable. "Can we talk?" I invited her in, curious about what had brought her to my door after months of silence. "I owe you an apology," she said, once we were seated in the living room. "I encouraged Marta to have the affair. I told her you were boring, that she deserved better, that she should leave you." "Why?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "Because I was jealous. You and Marta had something stable and real, and I'd never had that. Every relationship I've ever had has ended in disaster, usually because I cheated or lied or sabotaged it somehow. I wanted Marta to be as miserable as I was." "So you convinced her to destroy her marriage?" "I convinced her that she wasn't happy, that she was wasting her life, that she could do better. I introduced her to Jake at a party, encouraged her to flirt with him, told her that having a little fun on the side wouldn't hurt anyone." I stared at Victoria, processing this revelation. "Does Marta know you're telling me this?" "No. She doesn't even know that I was manipulating the situation. She thinks the affair just happened naturally." "Why are you telling me now?" "Because I've been watching what happened to both of you, and I realize I destroyed 2 lives because I couldn't stand my own. Marta lost everything. Her marriage, her friends, her job, her reputation. You lost your family, Jake's in prison, all because I was bitter and jealous." I thought about this for a long time. In a strange way, it was almost comforting to know that Marta's betrayal hadn't been entirely her own idea, that she'd been influenced by someone she trusted. "What do you want from me, Victoria?" "I want you to know that Marta really did love you. Maybe not at the end, when she was caught up in the fantasy of being with Jake, but for most of your marriage, she loved you. She just got lost somewhere along the way." "And you helped her get lost?" "Yes, and I'm sorry." After Victoria left, I sat in my empty house thinking about love and betrayal and the complicated ways people hurt each other. I thought about Marta in Denver, trying to rebuild her life. I thought about Jake in prison, paying for his crimes. I thought about our children, navigating their relationships with both their parents. And I thought about myself, sitting alone in a house full of memories, holding a key that no longer opened anything. I walked outside and threw the spare key into the trash bin. It made a small metallic sound as it hit the bottom, barely audible but somehow final. The next morning I called a real estate agent. It was time to sell the house and start over somewhere new. I'd kept my dignity and my self-respect, just as I'd told Jake. But Victoria was right about one thing. I'd lost my family in the process of protecting myself from betrayal. Maybe it was time to figure out how to build something new from what remained. 3 weeks later, I signed the papers to sell the house. The new owners were a young couple with 2 small children, full of excitement about their first home. I watched them walk through the rooms where Marta and I had lived and loved and fought and finally destroyed each other, and I felt something that might have been peace. As I packed the last of my belongings, I found a photo album I'd forgotten about. Pictures from our early years together, our wedding, our honeymoon, the day we bought the house, the kids' birthday parties, family vacations. We looked happy in those pictures, genuinely happy. I closed the album and put it in the box with the other things I was keeping, not because I wanted to remember the marriage, but because I wanted to remember that love had been real once, even if it hadn't been strong enough to survive the weight of secrets and lies and betrayal. The moving truck arrived at 8 in the morning. By noon, 18 years of shared life had been reduced to boxes and furniture, loaded onto a truck and driven away to my new apartment across town. I stood in the empty house one last time, looking at the rooms where my family had lived and grown and ultimately fallen apart. The afternoon sun was streaming through the windows, highlighting the dust motes that danced in the air, and for a moment I could almost see the ghosts of who we used to be. Then I locked the door, left the key under the mat for the new owners, and walked away. 6 months later, I got a postcard from Denver. No message, just Marta's signature and a picture of the Rocky Mountains. I studied her handwriting, looking for clues about how she was doing, whether she was happy or lonely or regretful. But handwriting doesn't reveal everything, and some questions don't have answers. I put the postcard in the photo album and went back to building my new life, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one small act of hope at a time. The key was broken, but I was learning to live without locks.